Whenever I fly on an airplane and I'm taking off or I'm landing, I always look down at the earth and I look at all the tiny little houses, and it just fascinates me to think that each of these tiny little houses has a whole world happening inside of it. Just a myriad of infinite possibilities. Laughter, boredom, depression, sex, dancing, joy, creativity, fighting, eating, farting. It just goes on and on. And every fart and every deep bellow of laughter goes into the walls. That energy gets eaten by each house. What happens to that energy? Does it turn into its own ghost? This is the story of what happened many years ago inside of 2 houses and a restaurant. Hold on, stop the film. This guy right here. Do you think he has any idea?
Hello, I'm David, and this is my living room. Train I ride, 16 golden. Train I ride, 16 golden. Look at my baby, put it that well. Train, train, coming round the way. Train, train, coming round the way. Look at my baby, put it that well. Hit it, boy. Get on his train, you ain't never coming back. Never coming back. Oh! Mr. Train. Mr. Train. We're gonna take to hell, and that's the way we'll do. Alright, kick up some dub, boy. Look at my baby, but it never will get. Thanks a lot, with the River Roses. Hello, I'm David. I'm David Forbes. And this is my living room. I'm the fellow who lived at 818 from 1985 to 1990. And I'm glad to see that you're all here tonight. It was quite the party house. I just wanted to say that It's a lot of fun having these things here. Tucson, Arizona was a very laid-back place in 1985. I seem to recall that you could just walk down 4th Avenue and run into random people and go into the cafeteria and see the old guy hanging out next to his pickup truck selling produce, and visit one of the many thrift stores on 4th Avenue. It was essentially a very affordable place to live. I think if you were paying over $150 a month to live there, you were spending too much money. And that meant that students could have their own places, so they didn't have to live in the dorms. And there were a lot of party houses. The cops were rather lenient. It was just kind of a place where, especially in the summertime, you could just do about anything and it didn't really matter. 818 Speedway was a house that I moved into because my previous landlord was evicting me from my old house, which was on Grant Road. This happened around the end of 1984. I found out about it, and then I was driving down Speedway and noticed that the house next door to my friend Terry had a for rent sign on it, and I thought, I need a house, and this house is for rent, and I know the person who lives next door. Why don't I move there?
I lived at 814 when I was young. 18, my friend Jeff Davis heard how much trouble I had paying my air conditioning bill from my first apartment, and then we had to go to the plasma center to try to pay the bills, and it was bad. So he knew about a different place to live, and so I moved in with him into the basement of 814 in 1984.
Jeff Davis, Aaron Colopy, and this guy Chris Weaver and myself rented the house. Chris lasted about a month, and then Terry moved in.
I was kind of looking for a place, and I was in a relationship with David, and he was moving in with Jeff Davis, and I can't remember his name.
Chris had to leave, and then Terry came.
Yes.
And I replaced, oh God, this guy named...
I need a place to live too, so, what about me? And I joined them. And so he left, and then that got us Terry, so that was a good thing.
They wanted me to come in and help pay the rent, and I needed to skedaddle out of my own place because I could not afford what they wanted me to pay.
The rent was $400 a month, so everybody it was easy for 4 people, $100 you had to come up with every month.
818 was an interesting house because it didn't have too much of a landlord. It had a property management company, and they were rather hands-off. And since I'm an engineer, it didn't matter that they were rather hands-off because if anything broke, I could fix it.
David Forbes, such a sweet person and very, very funny and quirky. And, he had pinball machines in there, the classic old pinball machines. He's always collected weird old things. He had the Batmobile, 59 Caddy, he had some old Volvos. He was always tinkering with things.
So he likes electronics and tinkering stuff. I always bring him my stuff when I need to fix turntables or amps or whatever. But he's a tinkerer.
He was a tinkerer and a fixerer, And if he didn't know how to do something, he would research how to do it. He's a systems and organized guy. And there was some unorganized crazy shit about him too, which led to more of the charm. If he didn't know how to do it, he would get an interest in something and figure it the fuck out. He has that engineer mind, and he's just a perfect do-it-yourself tinkerer.
I'd like to say hello to everyone who's watching over on channel 37 as well on the special live edition of Electric Window.
818 Club, it's just another thing that David Forbes did. He's a doer. He still is. People say, let's make I'd like a pirate radio station. He's like, okay, here's a pirate radio station. Come on over.
He was always just somebody that just did things. I mean, look at he did that radio Limbo and stuff like that. He was always just somebody that he liked to just create atmospheres or create scenes or create a ruckus or whatever it was he was doing, but he's always kind of been that way.
Just David with his gadgets, with his technical know-how and the pinball machine.
His epic way of life. He had the the vintage beer machine. No, it was a vintage Coke machine with beer in it.
Wait, I gotta get. He's getting a beer right here. Budweiser.
Oh yeah? It's a Bud. My God. I left you some. The Coke machine. Great, thanks.
We drive over to 818 and all the lights are off, but of course the back door is open.
Just sneak into the back door. You didn't even have to check in with anyone. You know, the back door's open. You could just walk in there, plunk down their quarters and walk out with a beer.
It felt magical as like a 16, 17-year-old.
As a 16-year-old or 17-year-old could actually have an adult experience and with a few quarters in your pocket.
I don't know, so I guess maybe chalk that up to, you know, another element of the place that allowed you to be yourself, because then as a 16-year-old you could do the things that you wanted to do.
And it was always the worst beer on the planet, you know? So it was like, you know, Bob's beer or Blatt's or something, but we're just throwing these quarters in.
He didn't get tired of the party. I mean, the punk rockers were breaking his window and climbing into the middle of the night to get to the beer machine, and he would just fix the windows and, you know.
He had an asteroids game in his house. We're like, what? You don't have to put quarters in? You know, he could fix everybody's amp.
I took my amps over to David to my amp won't work. You think you can fix it? Yeah. And he was more than generous about not charging much.
And he was in bands. It was like, wow, who is this guy? You know, so he was like a camp leader, like a super great indie camp leader.
You know, David Forbes, I didn't talk to him much at all, but he'd made this bong that crossed the length of the room. Do you remember that? There was this giant bong.
This is my good pal, Joe. Joe, say hi.
Hi. Dave used to rent PAs. Well, Dave would always do, you know, my little tiny shows for me and stuff. Dave, you know, he did them cheap, he was great. So we set that up. Dave was gonna go set up the PA, and we get there, and the building's locked. Luckily, I have one of those 6-foot pair of bolt cutters. So I made my way into the building. And Dave, you know, being the electrical genius he is, turned to about 8 seconds, had the power on. So in about 25 minutes later, we had the PA set up, ready to go.
And so it was kind of, the landlord never really knew what was going on at 818. I paid the rent every month because I was an engineer and I could afford to pay the rent, so that's all they cared about.
Speedway Boulevard, the ugliest street in America? Tune in to Cake on 9 News at 11. I'm Sid Bluff-Niven. See you then.
And who are the original tenants of 818 when you moved in?
When I moved into 818, I moved out of a house that was owned by a university professor, and his son was living in the garage. And his son Blake was a fellow who I'd been out to clubs with and stuff, and I'd gotten to know him fairly well. He was basically a very sociable fellow who could put back a pitcher of beer in about 10 minutes and smoke a bong that was 6 feet tall.
There was this giant bong that you would take a hit. I can't be inventing this.
He got evicted at the same time I did, and so we both needed a place to live. And I figured that, well, this guy knows how to get people to come over and have fun. Why don't I try living with him and see how it goes? And so I did.
818 was David and Blake.
Right.
And David's, you know, this genius that set everything up and was running things, but Blake was the guy that was there 24 hours a day, with, you know, running around in his football pants, kind of looking like a bigger Axl Rose. Just a one-of-a-kind character.
By that time, David had moved in next door. He and I had dated and then broken up, but we still were friends. And then he moved next door with like Blake and Chris Wagganer.
So I lived in the room off the kitchen. It was essentially like the dining room of the house, but it had like a door off the kitchen and a door off the living room. So I kind of had a room, and Dave was like, he let me stay in there for a while. I think I paid a little rent.
then the parties commenced.
So 818 started out life as a party house, and I say that because about 2 days after Blake and I moved into 818, we went to a show at Rex, which was at the time on 10th Street, about a mile away. And of course, Blake invited everyone at the punk rock show to come to our house for an after party. And a lot of beer showed up. There might have been a keg, I can't remember, but I do know that the next day the floor was completely black with dirt. And so I figured our party house has been christened. This is now a party house.
And we're rolling.
I started Rex Records back in like at the end of 1984.
Discos Rex, localizado al 1008 al este de la calle 6, su alternativo para su conexión musical. Tenemos una gran selección de discos, cassettes, CDs domésticos e importados. Compramos, vendemos y hacemos cambios. Además, hacemos órdenes especiales y comprarles extra. También vendemos posters, t-shirts, joyas, libros y zapatos de todos estilos y mucho, mucho más. Discos Rex, localizado al 1008 al este de la calle 6. Visítenlos. WREX.
Virtually the only place to find punk music in Tucson is at Rex Records, run by Chris Olivas and Joey Furno.
My roommate, Chris Olivas, he was kind of instrumental in the scene for a few years. He ran a place called the Danger Zone on Congress.
And then eventually Chris did the Rex, which was insane. I don't know if they ever went there or not, but every show got bigger and bigger and bigger and crazier and crazier and crazier. And luckily it got shut down before anybody got killed, because I think that was the way it was going.
The scene is constantly changing. There's new bands coming out and new records coming out virtually probably 5 a day. You know, new records and new bands starting up. And that's exactly what the scene is trying to promote. A sort of anybody can do it, a do-it-yourself attitude where you can start a band, you can record in the studio, you can put out a record, you can play in front of people, and you don't have to conform to anybody's standards except for your own.
So how long was the Rex Club around for? Was it like a year or two? Like, tell me.
6 months, if that.
Okay.
Yeah, 6, 8, yeah. 6 months. We didn't do very many shows. We did the last Minutemen show right out in between Tucson and Phoenix. That's where D. Boone died. That's where they got in the accident, and yeah, so.
Wow, so they played their last show was at Rex right before that?
Joey Furno, we used to call him Joey Rex because he opened up Rex Records right next to U of A Liquors on 5th and Park. Opened up, and I was like in heaven. I thought I was down on the Sunset Strip, man. It was like a little tiny little hole in the wall.
That was like the little headquarters of the scene, really.
He had all this vinyl records and stuff. And Joe would tell us about all these parties and all these bands that were coming into town.
We got to move to Tucson for college, actually. We're going to go to the U of A. Okay. Me and my little brother, so we moved down there. But we actually took our whole band down there. HC, Heavy Convictions, met all the people and the punkers. And Joey from the record store got us into the scene right away with a band. We were there like less than a week. I think we were there a couple of days. He had a show set up for us already.
We had a lot of problems with the club. What happened is, I can't exactly say, I know for a fact that he did do this on one night. Was one of the shows, there was a big show going on there. This guy that owned the Green Dolphin, remember the Green Dolphin? There was always a problem. I don't know if you remember the 80s, there was always a problem with the jocks and the frat boys. And, you know, I remember the band Frat Boy Assassin and all this stuff, you know. That's what went down to the Green Dolphin. It was always a lot of frat boys. This owner would see the shit going on, and he would always want to start shit to get us out of the neighborhood. I don't know what it was. He had some kind of grievance. And yes, he used to give free drinks and get a bunch of jocks all drunk and go start shit with the punks. And this happened all the time.
So we always had
You know, we had a warehouse or a club, or we would rent spaces like the Elks Lodge, wherever they would rent to us until they, you know, got complaints about the noise and didn't rent to us any longer. And I remember doing shows in a building that was just completely dilapidated and falling apart, and I'm sure really dangerous, and the fire marshal shut that down. But, you know, there was a dedicated group of older people in the scene that kept it going, you know, and Rex Records was part of it, and Joey and, you know, Chris, and so they kept it going. And, you know, so whenever there was not somewhere to play, which was temporary, we would have shows at the party houses, right? So 814 and 818 and the OZ house.
After Rex Club closed, so we started doing parties. There was a lot of friends that always needed their rent to be paid and helping out with that. And so other people came up and suggested, hey, let's have a party at this house. And Dave Forbes was already having parties at his house, so, and that's at 818. So we started doing them at 814 and 818.
And we had a lot of friends who mostly were in college, and I was in a band with some of them, and they tended to play music that was kind of college rock, except it was a little more country and a little more underground. Well, basically, if college rock was done by the Velvet Underground, that's what it would sound like. And then 814 started out with those people, but it gradually migrated into the punk rock, and there were a lot of hardcore kids hanging out there. And the hardcore kids would hang out at the parties at 818 as well.
There was a lot of intermingling. I think the 818 were like the cooler kids or something, you know. They were like, I was already 25 in 85, and I didn't know anybody, and so I think it was a little bit more difficult to become friends with some of the 818 people. I was just a fan of the bands. And then Tim Gasson had Randy Love's Flower Hour.
My name is Randy Love. I do a radio show on Friday nights on KXCI called the Flower Hours, the best of the new psychedelic and garage rock.
On KXCI late night, like late on Saturday nights or something, and I was all into garage bands more than punk rock.
So I feel like it was a really good mix of like collegiate, kind of like lit students, and a lot of kind of nerdy underground people, and then punk kids all kind of mingling together. Lots of PBR and wait, what was the other shitty beer we drank?
814 somehow was a little bit more rough around the edges.
They definitely merged, but I would say that, you know, David Forbes was a lot more adult than us. He was a, you know, computer whiz and had a real job and was making real money. So I would say that his house was a little bit more high tech, and this house was a little bit more grunge. I mean, don't you think?
Well, like high, low tech.
High, low, you're right. Well, I mean high tech in terms of like all the amps worked better over there. The pinball machine and the beer machine is what I mean by high tech.
So 818 certainly had its fair share of parties, and there were bands playing, and there were people there, and they were consuming beer, and then they were hanging out in the little alley, and next door was Greasy Tony's, which was a late night pizza and sub joint. Greasy Tony's was an integral part of the 818 experience.
How do you describe your group? Do you consider yourself a garage group or a rock group or a psychedelic group? Do you play polka? A Lawrence Welk cover group? What are you?
Well, actually, Randy, we're pretty much inspired by the etchings of Liebert Hughes, who was a famous 16th century artist.
The cool thing about 818 was it was sort of like this Bermuda Triangle that was like you had 818, and then you had like Greasy Tony's, and then you had this major thoroughfare, Speedway Boulevard, and then right across the street you had this huge Circle K. So you had this sort of triangulation of like chicks and rock and roll and artists and creativity and mayhem at the 818 house at any given time. And they had Greasy Tony's, which was like this crazy sandwich, Philly cheesesteak.
Most people got, what was it called, like the trash pile or something?
Those damn sandwiches.
The trash can was one of their sandwiches there.
Trash can? Yeah, they were so good when you were so drunk.
Tucson's got a new favorite sandwich with a most peculiar name. The Trash Can, here at Greasy Tony's on Speedway Boulevard, is feeding drunken kids into the morning hours. I'm Sid Blefknifen for KGON 9 News, details at 11.
Sort of fast food joint, and then out with an outdoor patio, which a lot of action sort of spilled over from 818 into the patio area, the outdoor area at Greasy Tony's, all hours of the night. And then across the way, of course, this busy street, you had Circle K, which, if you had some dollars or whatever, you could buy as much beer as you wanted.
We'd be kicking back at Greasy Tony's, eating a trash can, and then we'd hear this music next door.
It felt like it was our private place, right? At night, when bars closed and they would still be open, and you could just walk over. We'd all be over there, like a whole party full of people all buying food from Greasy Tony's. And I remember we could sit out in the back wall and eat it, but it was right there. I thought it was funny because they were also in New Jersey. I remember that. They had two places, one in Tucson and one in New Jersey. I felt like I had a connection with them because I was Eastern,
Most of us were vegetarian, as I remember. Like a punk rock thing in the 80s was definitely to be a vegetarian. So I for sure remember when the parties would die down, because they were open till like 2 or 3 in the morning. I remember Greasy Tony's was open really late. And I definitely remember having like girlfriends sit down and review whatever happened at the party that night, sitting at Greasy Tony's. And it would always either be a couple of slices of cheese or a veggie cheese grinder.
I would always get a vegetarian grinder because I was vegetarian back then.
And that was like okay, we better go eat.
So you get your Tony sandwich and you sit down and you review the night.
Review the night, yes. Like, who hooked up with who? Did you see what so-and-so did? So-and-so never showed up.
Because we used to go there and eat that food and then regret it.
Tony gave us we were just wandering around or going somewhere, and he's like, hey, you guys want free pizza? And he gave us free pizza, and we all got sick, very, very sick from it. So that's not a good idea to take free pizza from Greasy Tony.
It always seemed like one of us worked at Greasy Tony's. You know what I mean? There was always some one cute punk rock girl or something maybe that worked behind the counter or something. He'd always take a chance on somebody.
It's pretty much kind of how I got the job at Tony's too, because I was like one of those conniving street beggars, and there was that Circle K across the street, so I didn't really have to go home for much. So I would just panhandle change outside the Circle K to go and buy food. And then honestly, I got that job at Greasy Tony's because I didn't know who Tony was, and I went up to him in front of Tony's. I just walked out of the door of 818. I walked over to Tony's.
I remember Carrie working there, and she was fucking awesome.
I seen some old dude sitting there and was like, dude, you got any spare change? And he was like, no, but I'll give you a job.
And just being silly and sassy and bossy.
And I was like, did this place? And he was like, yeah. And I was like, I never worked before. And he goes, I don't care. And that was when it was open till 4 a.m. So when I was in high school, I was serving the after hours party crowd. And then I would walk to school in the morning.
I moved to Tucson as a very, very green 18-year-old. I moved here from Nogales, Mexico. And that was in 1983. I started working immediately. I got off the Greyhound bus at 7 o'clock in the morning. And I started working at Greasy Tony's at 9. I worked there from 1983 until 1987.
How did you know to go to Greasy Tony's?
So I actually knew someone who worked there, and I had traveled to Tucson the week before to see if he was hiring. And Tony told me at the time that he wasn't hiring, but he will get in touch with me as soon as he did have an opening for me. So one night I was in Nogales. Again, I was 18 years old at the time, so I was doing things that, you do when you're a rock and roller and you're crazy and you're 18 and, you're just free. So I came home one night and my mom was waiting for me at the door, and I was really no shape to understand much of anything. But she told me, well, guess what? Greasy Tony called, and you start tomorrow at 9. I already have your shit packed. You're taking a Greyhound bus to Tucson tomorrow morning. And that's exactly what I did. I was feeling like crap the entire way here. I got off the bus, the original Greyhound bus station, right here on, Congress. And I walked to Greasy Tony's, and I waited there for Tony. And that's when my amazing Greasy Tony's journey began. Yes, little did I know at the time all the great stuff that was gonna happen there. One thing that I think people don't understand about Greasy Tony's is that when you tell them that you work there, people go, oh, so you were flipping burgers. And it was so much more than that. Greasy Tony's was like its own little universe.
We knew the guys at Greasy Tony's, so sometimes we'd just end up in Greasy Tony's after they shut it down, hanging out with those guys, or just, there were a lot of places to go, but that's where it was our hub.
I mean, so much stuff happening there. I met so many people. So many amazing things happened to me while I was there. So it really became more than just a job. I mean, I love going there every day. I tell people, listen, at the time, I was here illegally. I knew absolutely no one here. I could barely speak English. Yes, I was flipping burgers, but I never suffered. The opposite, the complete opposite. Some of the best years of my youth were spent there. I will do it all over again in a split second. You know, Tony was great, bless his heart.
There's been quite a ruckus on Speedway Boulevard. The kids are looking for a place to slam dance. I'm Sid Bluffniven for KGUN 9 News, details at 11.
I don't know how long she was there before we broke it, even maybe a year. She was more of a serious student.
And then I moved out in 85 because Dave and I broke up.
And then it sort of transitioned into, a bunch of different other people.
You lived at 814, correct?
Yes, at 814. I moved from the dorm on Park to the place on Tyndall to the place at 814. So I could move with a dolly, Tasha was there, but she came a little later.
A bunch of different other people like Dorian, Island, and Peter, moved in.
Peter had decorated with all the stuff he'd found cruising around alleys, and a lot of TVs that were broken and just showed static.
There was multiple TVs set up everywhere, set up to VCRs, sound systems, and every single TV had a racer head on it.
I feel like we had another roommate, and I can't even remember who it was.
And Adam, and then Tasha moved in, guys downstairs moved in, John Langford and Hellrat.
I don't know, and I needed a place to stay, so I started crashing in the basement. And I crashed there long enough, to where I became part of the household,
I'd like to say hi to all my new friends out there.
Sure, I was in some fucker's way or something like that. I was sleeping in the hallway or wherever I could, But finally I found a little cubby hole right downstairs in the basement, right next to John Langford's room. And then John Langford's room was blanketed off like a wall of blankets. And Gobb's room was next to that, and Dave Goodman's. So there was 3 boys in that one room, but it was a pretty big room. But I had that little closet space right there, and Tasha Bundy lived on the other side.
But it all runs together in my head when stuff happened. I'd already been going to 818 House for parties and stuff.
The change from mellow to punk rock mostly happened when Tasha Bundy moved in.
Do you remember the first time that you went to 814? Can you remember that? How did you get there?
I don't remember the first time. I think we went there all the time for just, we were kids.
Tasha, she went through a thing there for a while where she was kind of playing the surrogate punk mom of the neighborhood. I don't know, I always felt like she had like a watchful eye on that block,
She was like a mom or sister figure. And I grew up with a twin brother. I didn't have sisters in the house.
She was an awesome lady. She made sure we brushed our teeth and fucking had something to eat. And she was only 15 years old taking care of grown-ass motherfucking men, dude. You know
How
what I
old were
mean?
you? 17?
Yeah, well, you know, I was a grown-ass man to me.
And I just they had I think it was the basement that I moved into first.
I remember my friend Tasha was living there, and at 814, and she had a room that was, it was like a basement, and it had a dirt floor, and she had carpets down and tapestries hanging, and you know, made it look really cool. But you know, you'd be in there and you're like, oh, I'm sitting on the dirt floor.
Her bedroom down there was so cool. It was like this little cave of like dried up rose petals and black and white flyers and photos.
I think she was probably 16 when she moved out of her parents' house, and that's, you know, and she found a place to live, and that was part of it too. I mean, people had our backs and people took care of us, and you know, just being part of the scene made people take care of you, and you know, they made sure you were okay.
I mean, I know I was going to Rex Records all the time. I was friends with Joey. I guess I was probably a point person, and he's like, yeah, of course, yeah, totally. Yeah, all the bands should play here.
I knew Tasha, I could trust Tasha. You know, I knew she was gonna take care of shit and things weren't gonna fall apart. You know, even though she was young, but she still was like, you know, she was just getting her shit together right then. Even as a 16-year-old, she was, you know, going, okay, I can do this shit. You know, she was taking control of the place a little bit at least. So that was cool. So I always knew that was there. And a lot of times it was kind of difficult to find places to do shows.
She was very much for the time. An earthy person like her was just what was needed. Somebody who would literally do the writing of the letters and the calling on the phone and the keeping in touch. And I think Joey did the same thing, just coming out of a business and whatever the pressures and responsibilities he had for that business.
It's very interesting to learn she was behind the booking of a lot of those events, because I don't remember her like trumpeting that fact much. It was just these bands, you know, these gigs would happen there, and I'm sort of curious, how did these bands from all over the nation end up there? And you were saying through Joey of Rex was one place, but that's a topic other people have talked about, that the punk communication network was very, you know, there was no internet then, not being used by people like us anyway, you know, and the record stores managed to communicate really well with each other. The bands, I mean, that they would know who to call and where to get a show. I mean, it was very, and there's another thing there too that needs to be emphasized when we talk about bands playing at 814, is that in that era, there were no regular venues for punk or underground bands to play. There were occasional venues because punk shows meant usually some kind of trouble.
Getting a bunch of punk rockers to do something is kind of like herding cats, but basically the way it would work is that we would get a venue. The church is a perfect example. They start having shows there, but then there would always be some incident that happened that made it so we couldn't have shows there anymore.
That's it. No more show. No more punk rock show.
What was one show that you remember that sticks out?
Sacrilege was amazing.
So I think it was probably 1985. I was in Berkeley visiting my friend Kiki. And one day I was taking a bus, and there was this group of punk, kind of metal guys, and I was, you know, checking them out. They were checking me out, and you know, because we stood out back then. It was a very small group of people in the 80s that looked like we did, and I overheard them talking about their band touring. Their band was Sacrilege, and I said, oh, hey, you know, if you're going to come to Tucson, here's a number to call. It was probably for Rex Records or something. And then I never, you know, I didn't see them after that. And then they showed up and they played, and they ended up playing at 814 House. You know, and I probably felt like, oh, cool, I set them up here, right? You know, and it was just part of, you know, it was part of the whole thing. You met each other, you connected, you know, you just kept it going.
It was all about networking back then. There was no internet. So it was just all about meeting people and making connections and stuff like that, and, you know, hosting bands and being hosted by bands. You don't forget a punch bowl with like Everclear, Hawaiian Punch, and 100 hits of acid in it. You don't forget that, right?
John Langford, his friends made the acid, and what they were doing was cleaning out the equipment, as far as I know, and they made this punch that they brought over for the party. It was the same night that this band Sacrilege was playing.
After they made their batch, they rinsed out the equipment with, probably Everclear, and this was the rinse, and that went into the punch bowl. And they tried to warn people, one small Dixie cup, please take it easy on this stuff, and that wasn't always the case.
Earlier on, we had heard about the fact that they were going to put this concoction together. And I remember they had like little Dixie cups to like do the servings, because you don't want anything more than that, right?
I was told 2,000 hits went into that punch. The one smart aspect of the whole thing was that it was in with Everclear. So you couldn't drink it too fast. Because I remember at the time, like, I'm gonna have 3 or 4 of these. But it was Everclear, so you kinda, had to sip it, like do it like a shot. By the time I was done with my first cup, I was thinking, I don't think I'll have any more of these.
Yeah, we started drinking it, and we started getting really fucking high. And I said to John, you gotta put a sign on that, dude. It's like, he put a sign on it, it just said high voltage.
Just came to the back door, walked in, and in the kitchen was the bowl of punch, and it was in the corner. I remember it sitting there, man. And someone had written a little folded sign that said high voltage. Now, I don't know if this is going to be one of those things where you're going to get people telling you 5 different things. It said electric acid, or it said beware, or something. I remember it saying high voltage.
Yes, I was at the infamous acid punch party because Blood Spasm played. We opened for Sacrilege BC. We got there first to set up our stuff, and I came in and there was a big punch bowl there. I think it was right in the living room, and somebody told me it was spiked, so we all started drinking. I think I had at least 1 cup, probably 2. I think most people had at least 2. As far as I know, everybody there drank some except our singer, who was very anti-drug. He was not anti-alcohol though, so when he came in, this is Bob Spasm, he came in and somebody told him the punch was spiked, and he thought it just meant with alcohol. So he was okay with alcohol. So he had a cup in his hand, he was about to drink some, and our guitar player Paul stopped him at the last second.
And someone saying, Bob, no! I think it might have been Billy Scream. Bob, no, don't drink, that's gotta happen.
By the time we were playing, we were peaking full on. It was great. It was super, super intense, because we're playing, we're on acid. There's a fucking huge pit in the room, and it's literally like a couple inches away from our faces, right? Because it's just a big room,
I've never seen a slam pit like that ever since. It just moved. It was just like in uniform situation, Nobody was throwing punches or anything. It was just like moving, dude, There's this guy on somebody's shoulders, and there was that chandelier that used to hang right there.
I do remember the light coming down. That definitely I'm pretty sure that got pulled down, or at least knocked around a bit.
And he like dodging the chandelier and shit, dude.
More than like visually, I can remember the intensity of the whole kind of thing.
It was powerful. It was just... It was insane. It was insane. I was seeing things that night. People were seeing things that night, well into the next day. I think, reports of people going to the hospital.
The man who transported the acid from San Francisco did end up in the hospital. He overdosed Orama, and boop, boop, be careful, kids.
Yeah, I just remember at some point, just kind of, I made this decision to just sort of turn off my mind and just sort of throw myself in there and let go. So the next thing I know, I was just lying on the floor looking up and laughing, and everybody was just moshing around me.
I think I probably had to leave because it was a little intense. But I remember it got pretty crazy.
But this was like a crazy party. That punch was not just, you know, it wasn't just electric Kool-Aid. It was like somebody had dosed us. It was like really intense.
And it wasn't until like a day or two later that people started talking about, you know, there was acid in the punch bowl, right? I said, I knew they loaded it. You know, we thought it was like Everclear or something, man, but no, man, that shit, we were seeing trails and shit.
We were coming in, it was just super crowded, super obnoxious and super sweaty. Blood Spasm was playing, and they had just gotten done, and Paul sees me.
Hey, caution, or danger, variant, danger, acid.
And then he grabs me and goes, this is really fucked up in here, man. This is really fucked up in here. And then he just hugs me, and I'm sweaty, all of his sweat. He liked to hug you with a lot of his sweat.
And I just kind of remember looking at him, and he just got more comical and more animated, and his face kind of got more like bigger, and his smile was like more exaggerated, kind of. Like, I was like, wow. And I had known he had been to clown school. He went to clown college, if you did not know that. He, believe it or not, went to Florida and was like, was going to be a clown. And so you can see it in his face with that smile and everything. So I knew this, and I'm looking at him, he got more clown-like to me. So I'm like, wow, I think it's starting to kick in, man. I'm going to step outside, you know, because there was music kind of going on, and people are in the room, and it was kind of tight. So I slid out through the kitchen, go out to the backyard, and there's a big backyard, some trees kind of hanging over the backyard, and they're just like, you know, and I kind of went to relieve myself, and then that's when it all was like, yeah, that was some acid in there for sure, you know.
I've got a copy of the Sacrilege album someplace, and they mention the punch on the liner notes.
Other than Paul being a maniac and maybe getting naked or something, I don't remember too much.
And the next morning, I got up to go to school.
Well, actually, it was around noon.
And I had to, this is when I was living at 818 and a half. And I came up the alley and turned the corner, and there's Paul Young.
Paul had been laying out on the front of the steps. This is, like I said, this is a work day or something. This is right next to Greasy Tony, Speedway Boulevard. Tons of traffic as he laid out naked for hours, passed out.
Laying buck-ass naked on the steps of 818, but he had his red Chuck Taylors on. So he's like butt-ass naked with a pair of red Chuck Taylors, like passed out on the steps. And I get on my skateboard and I start to freaking ride down the road, and I can't remember. It seems like I went over to 814 and told Tasha, like, hey, I think Paul's like naked in the road. But before I got to do that, the mailman came by and saw Paul like passed out naked on the steps. He did like a juke, like a sidestep, and just tossed the mail up on the porch because he wouldn't go closer.
I wasn't there, thank God. And but I did hear about it. We did get a good laugh.
And it was pretty fucking funny.
He was working at the record store Roads to Moscow, so he was like a pretty big figure in the music scene at that time. I think before that he worked at another record store, so he was pretty well known.
He was always interested in playing you different kinds of music, you know, like you'd come in and he'd say, now, Michael, this is a new kind of music. This is called industrial music. Here it is, and he put on this SBK record. It's like, this reminds me of early Tangerine Dream. I'd never heard of, and I vaguely had an idea. He had a vast musical knowledge, and he didn't always show it, because the punk scene, there was a thing about, coming from the pure inspiration and your skill doesn't matter and all that stuff. But he was very, very musically knowledgeable guy.
The record store out at Park Mall, and go there and hang out with Paul for a while, and he'd be like, "You, dude, I knew you'd like this. I put this aside," and he was just great.
Because we knew him from Zips and we're friendly with him, he was kind of on our side early on, and that was, I think, a protective factor. I never got harassed.
I'm a little guy too, and he was a protector. He'd pull you out of the way. It's gonna get bad, like move you out, like just usher you aside. No, he was very paternal.
Paul had our backs the whole time, and Matt Mayers also had our backs. These are people who actually had been. Paul had been I think he'd been in the Marines or something.
He was really like an uncle almost in a lot of ways, or camp counselor, or a disturbing teacher.
He was really another one of these really complex figures.
But I remember him once praising my knees in a Jamaican accent, saying, "Johnnies," and touching knelt and touched my knees, saying, "Johnnies."
Without any further delay, here they are, the Johnnies.
Johnnies didn't care about that. Doc Martens and bondage pants and leather jackets. You know what I mean? They were like, we're here. We just kind of got out of bed.
Yeah, kitty, kitty. I felt like the Johnnies was such a, fuck it, let's do a band with no purpose, and it was fun, and it was great, and no one cared.
The Johnnies were a band for the ages, and they were one of my favorites. I think that the Johnnies were emblematic of 818, or at least my recollection, which may be a little beer-addled.
I love the Johnnies.
The Johnnies were one of my favorite bands.
A little trashy, a lot of fun.
Just first off, I just want to say,
we never knew what he was going to do. He would always just come up with stuff. He didn't plan anything with the band.
Well, it's just been my policy that what people have to say about me behind my back is really no business of mine.
He gave that whole intro out. I heard what you said about me.
But I heard what you said about me, bitch! Well, you ain't nothing but a bitch.
He could just connect with people so well.
He was so sleazy in the most wholesome way. How could you not want him to be your front person?
And so laissez-faire, and just didn't give a piss about shit.
But when he was on, he was fucking on, man. And the fact that you could have a musical genius like Gene Rulli. Along with Julia, who's still just picking up chords at that point relative to Gene.
Well, it was Julia's band. She pulled from these odd folk, almost historic, not quite rockabilly, but she was pretty eclectic in her taste.
And the Johnnies was so kind of loosely thrown together, and everyone's, opinion was part of it.
But again, it was her show. It was her call on almost everything. Occasionally, as a concession, she'd allow me to suggest and include a song in our set list. One was Saturday Night by the Bay City Rollers. I don't know why. I thought, oh, that'll fit.
I can't remember if David was already playing with this, and I don't really remember how David got involved, but probably through Julia.
It was David Forbes.
Yes,
it was David,
the bass.
David Forbes. Just that complete laissez-faire attitude with the low-slung bass, and then the drummer.
With one of my favorite drummers in town.
Yeah,
that's
Tina.
Tina.
All right.
You always be more. The silly and annoying hair product
me feel so sexy. Cinnamon hair products are featured in finest salons and leave my hair feeling wonderful. We provide computerized style and root firm used only by the best. Then and I will give you the best, so shake your head, darling. Ooh, my baby.
We're all connected by the music, and there was some really great bands in Tucson, UPS.
UPS.
River Roses were fun.
I love Caitlin, so I loved River Roses.
The River Roses.
The River Roses. They were the band that you know that I love.
What Went Wrong.
One of my favorites was What Went Wrong.
What Went Wrong?
Opinion Zero.
So I remember seeing Opinion Zero play, being like, oh my God, this is amazing. Like all the punks and like there was like a pit in the middle of this like small like living room, and I was like, this is insane.
Los Hamsters.
Los Hamsters.
Los Hamsters. Oh my God, I loved Los Hamsters.
Life is so great, and I always are worth the wait. In our city, in our town, nothing more worthwhile can be found.
Los Hamsters. When I ended up like kind of out on my ass from all my previous bands, I kind of figured that I wanted to do something different. I wanted to do something that I would consider punk and that nobody else would. It ended up with Julia Mueller on drums and Linda Andes on guitar. I went with Linda Andes to Rainbow Guitar and helped her pick out her guitar and her amplifier.
Why don't you learn to play guitar so we can have a band together? So I did. What do you need? 2 chords, right?
I was on bass and Peter Catalanati, Splat, was the singer. We did some originals of mine, some oddball covers.
I mean, it's surprising me that people said that we were their favorite. I mean, we did have a lot of people that came to our shows and stuff. I kind of think it was because we were probably one of the first bands that was like fans that became musicians. You know, Matt was the only one who'd been in a band before.
What was the third band that you were in?
Are you thinking of Los Hamsters?
Oh, right. Well, man, you were in like the coolest bands in Tucson. How did the band end up breaking up, or what was the splitting point with the band?
You know, I used to kid with people that what happened was we got good enough at playing our instruments that we weren't punk anymore.
The fact that you didn't really have to know how to play an instrument to get up on stage and play was so liberating, was so beautiful. And so many of us, you know, we absolutely thrived in it. I got you. We were there, brother. We were there. You know?
Back then, you know, these bands like the Johnnies or Los Hamsters, all those bands, you know, they were all just like, you know, nobody had ever been in a band or played a musical instrument before, so there was no competition. Nobody's like looking to get signed or anything, you know.
Most of the kids that were playing there, the majority of them couldn't play an instrument, which made it even more great because you're like, oh, hey, I'm the same way.
I think of the bands that played at those party houses as sort of being the scruffy bands, not in the same league as bands like the Phantom Limbs.
I love the Phantom Limbs. But really, it's like anybody that was playing, I was all about.
The Phantom Limbs, adored the Phantom Limbs.
I don't know if they remember just how huge the Limbs were in Tucson. I mean, they'd play a gig and they'd draw 400 people every time.
I remember one night I was talking with one of these hardcore kids, and he was saying, yeah, that band that's playing, they're not hardcore, they're Slurpie core. And that was my favorite description of the music at 818's.
Tucson hardcore referred to the Johnnies as Slurpie core, which, good-naturedly.
It's all Slurpie core.
And then there was rivalry stuff between punks and Slurpie core.
Slurpie core, dudes. It's like these guys.
I rip off your mask and your face came with it. You fell to pieces at my feet.
Slurpie core. Blood spasm rules. UPS.
There was like a little bit of a friendly rivalry, I guess I would say. They would call it Slurpie core. But it was not like, it was not mean-spirited at all. It was totally just like, you know, punk kids being silly. And the Johnnies were good. That was the other thing too. Like they could diss them, but they would also be like, you know, of course, tapping their foot and like watching their foot like, damn it!
I got more tattoos. UPS right there. Screw all the Slurpie core. More blood spasm.
Was Los Hamsters part of the Slurpie core scene?
Definitely. We were like a originator.
So
OG Slurpie gore.
you actually were like on both sides. You were like had one foot in Slurpie core and one foot in hardcore. Like conflict, corporate whores, and then you were in like Los Hamsters, or started Los Hamsters, who was like one of the. You were like the gods of Slurpie core. What was Slurpie core? Why was it different?
Well, I think
why was it Slurpie core?
A couple of things that I will say is, well, my disclaimer is, I think at the time Slurpie core was intended kind of derogatively. It was like that 7-Eleven drink, Slurpee. It was like really nothing. And it's kind of like, but it's like, it was like a thing because it was a cultural touchstone. Everybody knew what a Slurpee was. So I wanted to make like something that had like a punk feeling, but would be more, but would be more relatable, I guess. I don't know. It's like it wasn't like selling out. I was just tired of like every punk rock band sounded the same to me, and I wanted to do something that sounded different. It was like definitely like a intentional stepping away from the hardcore thing.
My favorite memory of 818 would have to have been those cable casts. That was probably the funnest things of my youth.
Okay, welcome. Is this it? Talk to me. Okay, we're live, I think, on something here.
We are live. Welcome once again to a special live edition of Electric Window. You're on channel 64, Macaw Cablevision.
Is this a commercial break?
Yes, no, this is a special edition of Electric Window live from the 818 Club. Tonight we have the Johnnies, the Deadbolts, Al Perry, and the Cryptics.
What a great show tonight, Chris.
Right, I'm Chris Wagner. I'm Chris Wagner. I'm Chris Wagner.
Hi, I'm Chris Wagner. You can see my new show, The Kitchen Sink Show, Sundays at 2:15. And it's a live show. You can call in and talk, say whatever you want. Really.
The Kitchen Sink Show, you're on the air.
Yeah, I think Bob Seger would maybe run over Madonna's baby. Large truck.
Bob Seger would run over Madonna's baby with the large truck. So indirectly you're saying that Madonna should not keep her baby.
One of my friends, Chris Wagganer, he actually had a show that he managed to set up a live uplink from 818 through the cables. They had 2 cables. One of them had gotten unused, and so they sent the signal from 818 up to the main studio where they were able to rebroadcast it over the whole cable system. And so we put on a couple of shows called Live from 818.
For the cable cast, we set up the extra bedroom, which was right next to the living room where the bands were playing. David had this PA and like all the gear in this bedroom, so that sort of became the control room.
All right, this is master control here. This is our VTR monitor. This is our digital reverberation unit for the audio. This is our main half-inch VTR unit. This, of course, is the micro van. I'm not going to go through that. Here's our audio board and our headphones. Where? Right here. Listen to him here.
And David Sleuths did the sound mix. He was my sound guy for that. So he was in there, headphones, and this PV, 16-channel PV mixer, and it sounded pretty good. It was funny because I went over to 814 next door to watch it. They had it on cable there. It was just a super fun night.
Yeah, it was really nice that Chris did that. It was so cool to be on the community access.
I remember the night that the Deadbolts were invited to play.
Fashion boys, buy my drink. Fashion boys, and now Fashion boys, oh, they're so young. Fashion boys, have some fun, yeah.
We went there, and I remember we set up all the gear, and David Forbes, who was the sort of the mastermind behind the whole situation, the tenant at 818, he wasn't there. So we showed up and we started setting our shit up, and nobody kind of knew what was going on, but Chris was there. He kind of pointed the direction. All right, set it up here, set it up there. So we're setting up our amplifiers in this very crowded living room. Small. I mean, the place was probably, I'm going to guess it was probably, a 12-foot by 12-foot room. We're setting up the stuff, we set it up, and we're waiting for Dave to show up. I guess we're waiting for David Forbes to kind of signal, hey, all right, show's on, whatever. And we start drinking beers, and it's like, okay, when are we supposed to play? Chris, we're gonna go out back, because again, you could exit through the kitchen of 818 and go out back into the area where there was another guest house back there, a small other rental house. And a lot of people used to congregate back there, so there would be all these sort of sub-parties everywhere. So I'm waiting there, and all of a sudden, I see this cloud of dust coming from the alley down the way. I'm like, what was happening? It's kind of dark, and I see this cloud of dust, and there's something coming. I see some headlights, because it's dark now, and this car is approaching at a pretty high rate of speed. And we're at the end of the line. We're the terminus, right, where this car is going to be. We're there, and we start to all right, let's make room for this car. And this car comes in like the goddamn Batmobile, and it comes in, it just slams on the brakes, and it's a hearse. Okay, it's a I'm going to guess accurately. I'm going to say that was about a 1957 Cadillac hearse, beautiful, with the wings, black, and there's David Forbes, and it's his car, and he's driving it, and he looks a little bit like Andy Warhol, and then I'm like, wow, that's impressive. And then I look over to the passenger, and here's this beautiful girlfriend, Wendy, all right, and she's like a dead ringer for Nico. A black hearse drives up, and there's Andy Warhol and Nico in the front seat, and we're all like just blown away. And they get out, and I recognize that it's David, and he's like, okay, let's do the show. And I can just remember the place is packed, and it was just rage. The place just constantly raged.
That's it. Al Perry's next.
I can remember one time getting off of work, and I came to that party, and I would just everybody's sitting there, and they've been partying for a while. So just to catch up, I just chugged a 6-pack, just one right after the other, and like I could drink that much and it would hardly even faze me. That would just give me like a nice little glow, you know. It was weird, but I can just remember chugging a whole 6-pack, just one right after the other.
Forbes! One for Langford!
Those were the days, huh?
Yeah.
And somebody put a guitar in my hand and that was it, you know.
Okay, this is a folk music hootenanny here, so everybody has to sing along. 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 It's this little sing-along number. It's a song by my good friend Fish Karma. Like a dog, you're gonna die like a dog. Gonna die like a dog. Woof, 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 woof. Die like a dog, you're gonna die like a dog. Gonna die like a dog. Woof, 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 woof. Gonna drown like a beach boy. Break like an old toy. Die like a dog. Buy some insurance to give you some assurance. It don't matter anyway.
And I can hear the girls in the background cheering him on.
Get a little house, get a little spouse, have a couple kids. Lose all your money, lose all your cocaine, lose all your socks.
I was just a little bit older. I mean, we're talking like I was 28, and I don't know how old these kids were, maybe 19, 20 or something, but even at that time, I was considered the elder statesman of the music scene. You know, I kind of, like later on, I could have seen being called, but I was kind of considered the granddaddy of the scene or something.
Die like a dog, die like a dog, die like a dog. Woof, 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 Thank you.
Al Perry, ladies and gentlemen, Al Perry.
Do you like chimichangas? If you do, you're in luck, because Tucson is the chimichanga capital of the U.S. And the chimichanga king of Tucson? You're right, it's Gordo's. Whether it's our little mini chimichangas or our big full-size ones, they're Tucson's favorites. And on Monday through Thursday, our regular $3.29 chimichangas are only $1.99, and that includes a side of rice or beans. So if you like chimichangas, I mean if you really like chimichangas, come to Gordo's on Broadway, just west of Kolb.
So that was the first cable cast, and it went off pretty well, and we decided that we should do another one. So I got a little better camera and did a little better lighting, and we got the river roses.
But the funny thing was, it was also my 21st birthday.
Whose birthday is it tonight?
It's Chris Holiman's 21st birthday tonight at the River Roses.
They videotaped this thing and it shows them like bringing the cake out and they're like, where's Chris, where's Chris? And then I was actually in the parking lot kissing a girl. They were looking for me.
This is another one of my fabulous birthday presents. You can see this. The Elvis scrapbook. Elvis Presley lipstick. Keep me always on your lips.
And Reiner played in the kitchen, which was spectacular.
When Reiner showed up and played in the kitchen, he showed up a little late. We were waiting about a half hour.
Good. Have you seen Reiner?
No, I'm not here yet. Hi, Ben. Are we on TV?
No, you're on tape. Reiner just came up.
Let's go follow Reiner.
Slow down, slow down. Slurpie core! Slurpie core! Okay. We'll bark real quick. Live news cam. Get up to the kitchen. Core! Slurpie core! Okay, well, looks like Reiner showed up, so I'm gonna power this down now.
Yeah, mic set. Are we installed? 1, 2.
I was sitting at Reiner's foot during that video and just, I'm a like classical oboist, right? And watching him like draw the beat slower and faster, like I didn't know you could do that.
And then he arrived and he had his guitar and he smoked a joint and then he set up his guitar and started playing for us. And it was really magical.
On Electric Window Live from the 818 Club, I'm very proud to present Reiner.
I'd like to make an apology here. I apologize for not being born in Mississippi.
Make them boys think that they own the world of voodoo. The voodoo. Yeah, the voodoo music got that whole world on the go. On the go. Here we go right now.
He was kind of like from outer space to us. We had no idea where he came from. We didn't know what a dobro was until, you know, we saw him play one.
Well, the voodoo music got the whole world on the go, on the go. Well, the voodoo music, it won't get to you, make you pat your feet and your hands to make you pat your feet. Jump about, voodoo music gonna knock you out, the voodoo. Got the whole world on the go, on the go. With the voodoo. Well, the voodoo music got the whole world on the go.
Okay, let's hear it for Reiner one more time. Yeah.
Just general public access fun.
Hello, my name is Charles Brown, and I was one of the 3 co-producers of the Twitch show, which was an acronym for the Tucson Western International Talent Fund.
Will you be on Congress Street between 9 and midnight this Halloween, or actually on the 26th for the giant twit party? Maybe.
Which was a live public access television show that was 3 hours long to start with, and ran between 1984 and 1986.
You're watching television.
And the format of the show was that we had a live band every single week. It was a live comedy, improvisational entertainment show. There were no other venues for bands to actually get on television back then and to have that experience. Access television was a brand new thing. Nobody was aware of it really. And so if you were on television at that time or even owned a video camera, people automatically assumed you were rich. But it was public access, so it was free. And they didn't understand that so much, but it was magic.
This is the Tucson Western International Talent Thon, live on the street. We're setting up here. We have a band that's going to be playing here in the street. If you're not doing anything better, come on down.
And we had a lot of great bands on there. UPS, which is an acronym for Useless Pieces of Shit, they were on our show. They played outside. They moshed in the street right in front of the Fox Theater, which was at the time going to be closed down. It was derelict. The sign had big rock holes in it where somebody had thrown rocks.
Come on down to the corner of Congress and Stone, where UPS is setting up on the street behind me. UPS, yes, you read about them in the Tucson Weekly. You read about them in the Wildcat.
The police thought we were a gang, so we were being watched by the police, and we were way over the top. So people thought that we were a lot crazier than we actually were, because we let them think that.
That's good.
Which actually came back to bite us in the end, because we could never get a show at any clubs in Tucson or Phoenix because of the reputation that we had created that wasn't real. But
UPS.
The band. The band UPS.
The band UPS is here.
I don't really know how we even got involved in that. I really don't. But, you know, we were like, oh, we're gonna play on the sidewalk. So it was supposed to be like this little like cameo thing on the sidewalk, you know, not with much of a crowd or anything. But it just like snowballed into this huge event. They had, like, I think Congress Street even got closed off.
They were moshing and crazy in the street. The vibe was crazy. The sheriff of Tucson was watching it on television, and he called into the show to see what was going on, to make sure everybody was all right, that things were all right, that he didn't need to send the police department because he was very concerned. It was crazy. Well, instead of getting upset, the sheriff of Tucson sent the police down to blockade the street so that we could continue dancing, and they could continue the mosh pit, and that was just amazing that he actually did that.
It was just mayhem.
Access television, live access television at the time, was our replacement for what we have now, which is Facebook. And we didn't have Facebook, but we were actually streaming video and doing Facebook before Facebook existed.
We were streaming before streaming was even a thing.
That was the coolest thing about it, and nothing could really explain what that meant to all of us at the time.
Hey, my name is Jimmy. I've lived here at 814 for, must be like 6 years now. I'm really happy here. I've had several roommates in the past, but none of them really stick. So now I live here by myself. I really love it. I think it's a chill spot, near everything. Yeah, I just feel like this is my home. One day, I was like on my way to work, and some guy was sitting there in my parking lot eating a sandwich. And we're in kind of an area where there's a lot of transient movement. And so I always stop people and say, can you please get out of my yard? And this guy, I remember this one particular guy, it was like 7:30 in the morning. And he was like, no, I just rode through town. I just want to see your house. Like, can I please see your house? Like, I'm going to work, like, I'm sorry. And then I just like, yeah, it's like a monthly thing where people come by here pretty frequently, like I said, and it's always that. There's always like, I'll roll up and someone's taking a photo on my front porch, or I've seen people roll up and they just want to take a picture of like the basement door, and not many people have asked to come inside, and usually if they did ask to come inside, I probably would say no. They usually just want to take pictures of the outside of it. I had this one guy bring his dad here, Yeah, it was just, that is a weird part of living here. Since I've been here, we've always known that these houses were going to go away, that they were going to do something with them. And so more recently, over the past maybe 2 years, I'm not sure what the deal happened, but I think the landlord sold the property. But from my understanding, they can't do anything with the houses because they're historical landmarks, I think. And so the plan, I think within the next 6 months, they're probably, what I understand is they're gonna lift them up and move them somewhere south of Broadway. I'm not sure where, but that was kind of the deal moving in, was like, you know, month to month, and knowing that any moment, like, they would be taking it away. But it's been 6 years, you know? So, good run. I don't know, this house is really old, right? So I feel like there's even like a history before what you're talking about. I like to sit here and I think about like why this house was built. And I've actually done some research on it. And I kind of like to pretend like, you know, this is like a U of A professor's house, or like, you know, like why would it be placed right on Speedway? Or, and you know, of course Speedway was in the 50s, the ugliest street in the United States, right? And so I think about like, okay, so this was built even before that happened, so it must not have been beautiful, but like the high ceilings and the moldings, and I think about all of that stuff, and then like the history through the 80s, and I've seen pictures of it from the 80s, the 90s even. And I guess I do feel that sometimes. I do feel like there's a rich history in this house that it's kind of weird that I'm the only one that gets to experience it at this point, you know? Like it's like there's no more, it's not a party house anymore. It's just like a quiet place now.
So yeah, I think most college towns probably had houses like this back in the 80s and 90s, and I think a lot of the music scenes probably started in these kinds of houses. Even if you interview people in Athens, Georgia, or Austin, or wherever, that probably their music scene started in the same way at house parties, because you could just have a place where your friends could get together and it didn't have to make money. Plus, if you're young, your friends don't really buy booze, and that's all bar owners care about, is selling booze. And so it was a whole dynamic that it gave us a place to incubate. And I think if you talk to most music scenes, they would say, yeah, we incubated in house parties and then became, you know, even like in New York with the hip hop culture, that probably started at house parties too. It probably all started in house parties. So I think that's just a small thing of like the Tucson story, but probably it's about the whole story of music in this country, that it was started in house parties, and then now maybe it's more organized. And of course now it's on the internet, it's more virtual. So that's our house party, is, you know, going viral before anybody knows you're on the internet. It's a new house party, I guess.
But I think it's also the size of the community and the size of the university at that time was just big enough that there'd be people to get to know, people to meet. You could find your own kind, but it was small enough to where you basically had to settle and just make friends with whoever you met. And kind of, you know what I mean? Like, it wasn't so vast. And I think now with things being online, and with Tucson also being a larger place, I suspect that it's probably harder for people for young, you know, young, whatever age, it's probably harder for people to get to know each other. Because part of the thing with the digital thing is it's always inducing you to keep looking rather than to focus on developing a relationship with the one thing you found.
Oh, that's great.
Whereas, you know, like, it felt very wide open. You know, I was 19 when I moved to Tucson, and it felt very wide open. I felt like there was all these possibilities. And I think that's that, you know, late teen, 20-something brain. It's just like life is opening, it's expanding. And I felt like there was all this opportunity and all these, you know, things happening. And at the same time, I kept seeing the same people. And we became friends.
It was a unique experience just because of the time it was in the 80s. There was a lot of things that were accomplished, but not a lot that was recorded. A lot of bands, not a lot of recordings of those bands. Pictures are hard to find. So it was just kind of a time period where everyone was hanging out, just doing what they were doing and not caring about whether it was recorded or anything like that. I'm lucky that I kept as much stuff as I did that I could release, so that there is some record of these bands, because there was a lot of great bands that, you know, no one will ever hear again, that existed, that never recorded anything.
thank God that there weren't cell phones and all of that. I agree. It was a weird, special, funky, silly, like slightly tragic, and, you know, kind of painful time.
You know, I think some of us, I'm going to just speak for myself, but maybe this will resonate with some other people too, kind of felt like there were a lot of things that were wrong. And we were like seeing it in the culture.
Disenchantment and Reagan and the sort of brutal politics that were happening and moral majority. And there was so much to say no to.
So the, you know, kind of the yuppies and the, you know, the fraternity sorority thing that's all infused with, you know, class and money and kind of superficiality in general in the culture, in the mainstream, kind of like boring and not interesting.
And the revulsion of, you know, the rise of mini malls, strip malls everywhere, and how everywhere in the country it would just be chain restaurants, and, you know, it just felt like this oppressive sameness that was being foisted.
And, you know, just feeling like there were a lot of things wrong, and also not feeling, you know, feeling kind of alienated from the mainstream, and needing a place to be. And I think that, you know, this little thing that was going on, anybody could play like me, you know, like I never played drums before, right? Anybody could play in a band if you wanted to. You were going to find a gig somewhere. Anybody could participate. Everybody danced, and they didn't care what they looked like or anything like that. People would hop around, you know, looking like maniacs. You know, just we kind of made our own alternative little world that had some things. It wasn't all nice, of course, you know, that people are people. It wasn't all nice, and everybody wasn't all nice all the time.
You know, you might not have liked everybody all the time. There was people that didn't like me, I know. There was people that I didn't like, I know. But at the end of the day, if I had to do something for somebody, I'd rather do it for any punk rocker than anybody else. And I don't know why, man. There's a weird familial, you know, sort of relationship there. Like, yeah, I'll fucking go give this dickhead a ride. Can't stand him, but at least he's not, you know, like that guy from my high school.
It was a different time, right? You know, Gob from What Went Wrong. They were being chased down the street, and I was standing on the porch of 814, and I happened to be wearing a Ramones t-shirt. And, you know, you had an ally. All you needed to do was wear a Ramones t-shirt or a Devo t-shirt, and you had an ally out there on the streets, right?
Like, we were all folks that got beat up or spit on. Like, that happened to all of us at some point, right? And so we had that connection. Like, we're outside of the norm, and we choose to be that, and our lives are different because of it, and that's actually a really fucking cool thing. And we have this connection to each other because of that.
We were all a bunch of misfits that found a place where we could all hang out. We didn't really have to know each other or become friends. A lot of them, you just saw them that night, and you never saw them again.
In Tucson, it was anybody who didn't fit into any other group was embraced. Our scene was, I think, very open and inclusive, and that's why you could have, like, how could the River Roses be part of the punk rock scene, right? They don't sound punk. And so all those different bands made up the punk scene, even though it didn't have an aural aesthetic that other places would have.
But there was a certain level of acceptance that anybody could have and be expressive and creative. And
we wanted the airwaves, we wanted individuality, and we wanted art. And I don't know, there was a lot to say fuck you to.
You know, it was like a celebration of kind of an alternate way of being in the world, I guess is how I would put it, in a world that wasn't really suiting us.
Just glad that we could have shared what we had.
So every once in a while, I'll be at a bar or something talking with someone, and they'll say, "Hey, wait, are you David?" were you that guy at 818? And I'll go, yes, I was. And they'll say, that place was amazing. I used to go there when I was a kid and it really changed my life. I had no idea life could be so wonderful. It was great hanging out there.
Thank you again for tuning in, and that's all for tonight. Good night.